Welcome to episode 3 of Mind the Gap, a journey in Azure transformation. The Mind the Gap theme title has been chosen by Haroon. Haroon, if you remember from our last 2 sessions, is our subject matter expert in the area of everything Azure and cloud. Haroon has got more than 10 years experience in .NET, C#, and Azure in finance as well. Today we're going to be focusing on the subject of security. So, Haroon, do you want to give us a bit of an intro as to what we're going to be discussing today?
Mm-hmm. So what we will discuss is how do we, in large companies, especially the ones that has really large on-premise structures, but they want to go to cloud, how can we fill that gap between on-premise and the cloud from the security perspective? So what are the components missing, what approaches that you will need to take, and etc.
That's superb. So, in a company like that, what do you think may have been the on-premise security that helps them to, and that could need to migrate to a cloud security model?
So, in almost every company that runs on Windows platform, everyone utilizes Active Directory. And especially large companies utilize it even more because most of the security teams or infrastructure teams are under heavy pressure from the business teams, from development units, and etc. So they kind of want only one tool to manage everything.
Yes.
And that's why they mostly use Active Directory and its tools to secure the applications, secure the users, secure sometimes the premises themselves. So that's what they do. But that kind of becomes a bottleneck, and in the long run, Active Directory gets too much pressure on it, especially if you're using, for example, Active Directory groups. You can easily have tens of thousands of them, and that will prevent you from manage easily. You cannot scale, you cannot manage them, and etc. And you will need to have strong processes that will drive both the infra guys and the users crazy sometimes. So that will be a hard thing to manage.
So if they've got that desire to move security to the cloud because it's a necessity if they're going to host things in Azure Cloud, what kind of features could they prioritize?
So the most important thing is that now you have internet exposition, right? So that on-premise systems are locked down, you have very big firewalls, either software, even sometimes hardware firewalls. Sometimes you have your applications, your virtual machines, they don't have internet access most of the time. At least they have one way of internet access. But once you go cloud, everything is accessible from the internet. Not every resource on every resource provider can be put behind a firewall. You cannot cut off that relationship. So what you need to do is you need to make your applications resilient against both internal and external access. And sometimes you may want to say, okay, this is a sensitive application. Let's not have people use this from outside of our network. And these type of requirements, you cannot do it with Active Directory this easily. You have Active Directory Federation services and a few other things, but let's remember that not everything on cloud runs on a domain, so you cannot. Active Directory is configured to run on a domain, control the things that's happening on a domain. So once you go cloud, then you won't be able to do that easily. And another requirement is, so you have everything on premise, right? You have role management, you have access management, you have a tool that orchestrates everything, you have users that is adjusted that's been trained to ask for the permissions. You have probably something like a service now that gets the request from the user and gives access to the people. But once you go cloud, either you have to implement a separate model over there, or you have to utilize the existing thing, then adjust it with the cloud. That's where Active Directory and Azure Active Directory plays well. So
can they play well together? Can you
Yep.
still use the on-premise security?
Exactly. So Azure Active Directory, that is that can work as a standalone directory as well, or you can say this can synchronize with an Active Directory that's on premise. So you can do it either one directional or bidirectional. And most of the companies that I've seen, they do it one direction. So they still have their Active Directory, on-premise Active Directory as the primary, and they have an Azure Active Directory that feeds from the on-premise one. What this does is that you still have the functionality, user database, groups, and everything that exists on the Active Directory, but now you can also utilize the specific features that Azure Active Directory provides. For example, OAuth, for example, role-based access management, app-to-app communication, or conditional access, which, for example, if you want to ask people to only access your intranet portal from on-premise, not through the internet, you can do that. You can specify a specific application and say, this application can only be accessed by a specific people in a specific environment and specific devices. You can do this.
Okay, so you've highlighted some of the shortfalls of only using the on-premise security setup, like Active Directory, when you want to go to the cloud, and how that limits you. And you said that the Azure security model can link quite well with Windows security model. What have you found the best solution that you've come up with?
So using Azure Active Directory on top of Active Directory gives you, like that, lots of functionality. And from a developer's perspective, that actually makes quite a difference. So we can still utilize the Active Directory, existing Active Directory groups. We can still utilize the user accounts, their metadata on top of them, or we can still communicate through Active Directory with other applications,
yes,
and etc. But what else we can do is, for example, Active Directory supports defining roles on top of applications, so you don't have to have a separate role structure on any other application. So that's, as a developer, that is always my problem with applications. Once you create an application, you need to specify who can use this, what are the roles or permission levels, and how are you going to automate this, talking with the infrastructure guys. Someone needs to give this access to the people. And this is where Azure Active Directory is quite powerful. It has a built-in functionality for this. You can specify your application's roles. You can assign either users or Active Directory groups to these roles. So if you have an organizational structure represented as an Active Directory group hierarchy, you can specify roles on applications, and you can map these groups and users towards that roles. So that is one of the things that I've used quite extensively on a few clients. And other than that, for example, you have application-to-application communication. So Active Directory treats applications as users as well. So you have a user account on that represents an application on the directory. Azure Active Directory takes it one step beyond. So you have something called service principal, or an application registration that's on the Azure Active Directory, which allows you to utilize OAuth for both applications and users. You can access to other Azure resources with this. Azure itself can play seamlessly with these service principals. You have an application can access to another application through a certain permissioning level, right, and all of this can be automated on behind the scenes through Azure portals or PowerShell commands on top of Azure Active Directory. So that is both useful for the developers, such as me, and also for the infrastructure guys that needs to give permission to people, but that is so scattered along the landscape, they don't know that they cannot do that quite easily.
Okay. In doing that, what are the most recent important lessons that you've learned?
The most important lesson that we've learned is it's not easy. So even with out-of-the-box tools, even with Microsoft support, so you have to dig that information. You have to learn how OAuth works if you want to implement it on your application. Yes, Azure supports instantly switching it on for an app service, but how do you do the role checks and everything? The learning curve is a bit high, but once you get the hold of it, that's quite easy. You can find lots of resources on Microsoft website or anything, but for me, the biggest lesson learned is that I actually managed to piece everything in my mind together, how a large organization should work through this type of communication. What my clients mostly learn is that okay, maybe learning curve is a bit high, but once we've got that, everything is so easy because we already had our Active Directory. We just pushed it up to cloud. Now we have lots of other features coming as well, and all of the out-of-the-box Microsoft tools are utilizing this as well. So you don't need anything else. You don't need a specific product that adds a feature on top of Active Directory, or you don't need, for example, a role management tool for this. If you have an identity management system that gives permission to people through request, you don't have to change it, for example. It already talks with Active Directory. Why not with Azure Active Directory as well? Or in the background, you can communicate or synchronize. So the company themselves, they actually figured out this solves lots of their problems. Azure Active Directory, as a single tool, solves all of their problems, actually.
What about at the lower level with Azure, with existing on-premise security administrators who are used to using Active Directory? In using Azure Active Directory, is there much of a different world mismatch, or how similar is it?
It's apart from that, for the new functionalities, you need to use Azure Portal. There's nothing changed for them. Yes, they have to know the new technologies and new features on it, etc. But for them, for the on-premise world, nothing changed. It's just a plugin that you can plug your cloud on top of your on-premise and work together. So user accounts didn't change, organizations hierarchy as groups, it didn't change, and it plays well with your on-premise tools, such as that if you have Skype for Business that you installed, or Lync that you installed, that works with that one as well. And if in the future, if you want to go to Office 365, that is your Azure Active Directory, you can have your Office 365 talk to the Azure Active Directory rather than on-premise one.
So you found it a smooth transition in talking to existing app support people?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. Not just for them, for developers as well. So I am quite comfortable with the Azure Active Directory. And I know, because there is nothing shielded away from me. So now I know what is in the background. Now I know our technologies, development technologies, are now driving the security part as well.
And it's secure,
OAuth,
and it's protected, and
exactly.
It's an out-of-the-box feature of this key product that you're using.
Exactly. For example, OAuth is kind of like a software technology, if you think about it. That's kind of grown itself. And now it's being dictated on top of Azure Active Directory or Active Directory rather than the other way itself. The other way, you would get Windows authentication imposed to you, but now we have OAuth. We can talk to other third-party companies through our Azure Active Directory. We can give a user account to them that they can sign on to their systems or our systems, etc. So this is quite important. This is quite useful for the companies to fill that gap, fill that security gap. Of course, there are like many other gaps between on-premise and cloud, for example. One of them is that we will discuss in the future, because now you have internet exposition to your systems. What do you need to do? For example, you need to rotate your application credentials. This is one of the things that we're going to discuss. Another thing is that you have databases now online. How can you protect them from accessing now?
Have you already decided what episode 4 is going to be on?
To
put you on the spot.
No, not yet, but
it's one of those topics that you've mentioned,
yeah.
perhaps.
I have a big list that we are both doing these videos, and I'm also trying to catch up with the articles in the background as well.
Yep.
So I have a big list that I will need to choose one from and talk about it.
That's tremendous. Harun, thank you very much for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, the articles that Harun mentioned are on the HarringtonStarTech.com website and the HarunLagos.com
Mm-hmm.
website. We'll be sharing them on LinkedIn. This is episode 3 on Mind the Gap Security, Azure Transformation. We hope that you can join us for episode 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you.